Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Romania Through Their Eyes. I'm here with Debbie Stowe from England, who's been here for
9 years.
So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Well, I came to Romania in 2002. At the time, I was studying a postgraduate diploma in journalism, and I wanted to work abroad, but I didn't have any particular country in mind. And I saw an advert for a job in Romania in the university department. I knew nothing about Romania. I thought I would apply for the job. I applied for the job, got the job, came here for what I thought would be a year or two, and I'm still here.
Wonderful. So what's kept you here?
Numerous things. I mean, I now have a Romanian partner, so that is part of it. But also, I really like the lifestyle here. As a foreigner, I have a far superior lifestyle to the lifestyle I could have back in the UK. Part of that is financial. I get a lot of freedom here. It's a cheap place to live, so there's not the pressure to work very long hours. I have a lot of free time. That's very important to me. I can pick and choose from a lot of interesting projects. That's very important to me. I like Bucharest. It's a great city to live in. So many things.
All right. So please tell me a bit more about what you do in Romania.
I work 1 day a week for a newspaper called Business Review. It's an English language paper. It was started over 10 years ago now by an American man called Bill Avery. And it's aimed largely at the expatriate business community, but we also have a Romanian readership too. It's written by a good team of Romanian writers, but of course the most fluent Romanian writer still makes mistakes with English, as do British writers too. So my job is to edit it and make it more native speakery, so to speak. As well as that, I'm a travel writer. I write travel guides for Thomas Cook Publishing, the British publishing wing of the travel agent. I do some freelance work here for UNICEF Romania, other freelance journalism as and when. I sometimes teach English, anything that comes up.
So it must be a pretty interesting life.
Yeah, I like it. I like having a really wide portfolio of projects. I like the variety. Sometimes, I might work 14 hours a day. At other times, I have the day off and I go to the cinema in the afternoon or walk in the park. So I really enjoy that variety, the different pace of life.
Tell me a bit more about the Business Review. I'm kind of curious. You said that it's aimed at the expat community. How large is the expat community in Romania?
It's a total guess, but I suppose there are in the low tens of thousands. I could be wrong.
So 20, 30, 40,000?
Yeah,
like
I suppose so.
Okay.
Yeah. The profile of the community has changed quite a lot recently. There are more international schools now, so you have more teachers here. And companies that had expat managers here are now tending to replace them with local managers. So perhaps fewer business people, more teachers.
I see. So would you say the expat community has grown or has it decreased lately?
I would say it's probably increased. It's certainly more common to hear English spoken on the streets now. When I first came here, that was quite rare, and if I heard people speaking English, I stopped to look. But now it's quite common, especially if you walk around Lipscani, then you hear English a lot. You see British cars, foreign cars.
Okay. So please tell me what you think about the country. I know you already mentioned that the lifestyle is more relaxed here. You like the way things are. But tell me a bit more. What do you think about Romania, about Romanians, about the culture?
Romania is a country where the hard things are easy and the easy things are hard. So if you want to come over here and build a successful business, okay, this might be more difficult in the recession than it was when I first came. But that's available, you can do that. You can make good strides in your career. these things are relatively easy to do. If you want to get a guarantee for your kettle that you've just bought in a supermarket, expect to wait in line, expect to fill in several forms, a lot of bureaucracy, expect to visit several different windows. If you want to find an apartment, don't expect to see a street sign for the next 15 or 20 minutes. So hard things easy, easy things hard. Romania is a country where cars park on the pavement and people walk in the road. When I first came here, it was a difficult adjustment in some ways. I found people were very direct. At first, when I saw two Romanians talking, it sounded like an argument all the time because they seemed to speak loudly and very directly. Later I learned it wasn't an argument, it was the Latin way of speaking, which to me as a British person where we're very polite some of the time and diffident. It just took some adjusting. I would go into a shop and someone who worked in the shop would say, "Spuneți," and I would feel like I must have done something to annoy them for them to be shouting at me. But of course, over time I realised that this was not the case and I adjusted. So how I feel now is very different from how I felt at the beginning. It's a great country to live as a foreigner. Of course, Romania has many problems, but as a foreigner, you don't feel so personally affected by them. You see it more as an interesting cultural experience and it's not your home culture. So I think as a foreigner, you have a different perspective from a Romanian who lives in Romania. Many Romanians, when I first came here, asked me where I was from, and their response would be, "So you're from London and you choose to live in Bucharest? Why?" They often wanted to go the other way. But as a foreigner, your take is totally different.
I'd like to explore that statement of yours that as a foreigner your take is totally different. Do you have any examples of that about Romanians, how they perceive you or how they perceive foreign countries and how you as a foreigner perceive Romania and Romanians, other than what you've already said?
Sometimes Romanians are quite negative about their home country. They feel it's corrupt, they feel it's struggling to catch up with the rest of Europe. And I understand that, and I think if I were Romanian I might feel the same, but they don't focus so much on the positive aspects of living here. Because Romania's come from post-communist society and it's developing, there's a strong sense to me of things getting better here. Even in the relatively short time I've been here, I've seen major changes. The business community is more sophisticated in terms of the services that it provides. You can get sushi here now. When I first came here, that was a distant dream. You can have everything you need for a very high quality of life and things are improving. In Western Europe, I think there's a sense that for some people that the best days are behind us and things are getting worse, like our economies are being overtaken by Asian economies. So whereas here things are getting better and I like that sense of positivity even if Romanians don't always express it.
You mentioned a little while ago that your lifestyle here is better than in the UK. Can you explain that?
Part of it is money. Here I could go to the best restaurant in town and it will cost me as much as an average restaurant back home. In London, the best restaurant in town is far beyond my means. So a lot of things are accessible here that are not accessible back in the UK purely for financial reasons. Also that frees up a great deal of time. So I'm the master of my time. My work demands are not the master of me. I can live here in the centre of the city, so I can walk to work. If I were living at home in London and working, I would probably have a commute of 1 hour a day each way. And in Britain, many people travel further than that to get to work. So a lot of your time in the UK is just taken up with the grind of getting to work, working, getting home, you're very tired. you have a TV dinner, you collapse in front of the TV and you go to bed. Whereas here I have a 20-minute walk to work, I can go in any time I like, within reason. There's just a lot more flexibility, so my time is mine.
That's very nice. How do you find, for example, the leisure life in Bucharest? By leisure, I mean the activities you can do in your free time. Do you find nightlife to be nice, the concerts, the various things that you can go to?
Yeah, there's a great deal of culture in Bucharest, and again, it's very accessible. So the Opera House is 10-minute walk from where I live. The prices are very affordable. Recently there was the UNESCO Festival. Again, that's affordable. And this is top quality, high culture. Where I live, there are 2 theatres within a 3-minute walk of the house. Okay, the productions are mostly in Romanian, but I've been here long enough to understand a bit of that now. Mm-hmm. There are lots of cinemas here. Again, very affordable. If you look in Șapte, there's a wealth of cultural experiences open to you, and they're all very easy to see and do. In terms of nightlife, a big problem for me is the smoke, because in the UK now I'm used to people not smoking in public places, and as a non-smoker, if you walk into a bar in Bucharest, you'll come out stinking of smoke. So that's difficult, and that puts some of the nightlife outside of what I want to do. But it's there if you want to. I mean, there's a great district now, Lipscani. There are bars and clubs, and it's a very thriving, lively district. So I don't think there's anything really you're cut off from in Bucharest. I mean, perhaps in London or Paris there's a slightly greater variety, but there's only so many hours in the week, so you don't need that much.
One of the things that surprised me about Romania is when I came here and I noticed that the theatre prices were lower than the cinema prices. Did you find the same?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the cinema prices vary quite a lot. I tend not to go to the multiplexes so much, mainly because it's exactly the same kind of cinema as I have at home, so it's not that interesting to me. I prefer the communist era cinemas like Corso and Scala and Patria. And if you go during the day, which my schedule enables me to do, then they are also very cheap. I suppose in comparison to the theatre prices, there's a big thirst here for Western culture, which is entirely understandable because Western culture was prohibited for so many years, and even though it's over 20 years now since communism fell, that's not really that long, so young people are very open to anything they perceive as Western, so I would understand why demand for that and therefore the prices were higher, even though it's a paradox if you look at it from a Western viewpoint.
How has coming to Romania affected your career?
Coming here has helped my career a lot. I came here for my first job after university, and it was a very steep learning curve. When you study journalism, it's very theoretical, and it starts from the point of view of journalism in the West. Coming here, to some extent, the journalism market is more like the Wild West. So I was thrown into very unusual situations that I hadn't been prepared for, and it was difficult, but I learned a lot. Also, I really feel here that there's a great opportunity. So in the Western market, everything's been done. The market is saturated, and it's very difficult to establish yourself, make a name for yourself. Here, because the market is still developing, it's very new, not everything has been done. So if you have an idea, you have a very good chance of making that idea happen. You might be the first on the market with that idea. It's not even necessarily your own idea, it could be something that you've imported from the West, but you might be the first person doing it here. So there's a lot of opportunity, whereas back home there are many people with my skills, and especially the media world, it's quite important to have the right contacts. So to some extent the top positions are a closed shop, whereas here it's a little like you're a bigger fish in a small pond, so you can become established, you make good contacts, you make a name for yourself. And from that, a lot of opportunities have come my way, not just in Romania, but outside Romania, but through a contact I've made here. So it's really helped me. Now I've written over a dozen books. I don't think that would have necessarily happened if I'd stayed in London, not because my skills or talent would have been any different, but those opportunities would not have come my way.
You already talked a great deal about the things you find to be good here in Romania, but if you have any more to add, please do.
I found Romanian people very welcoming to foreigners, although as I was saying, when I first came here, I found the style of communication very direct. People are very open, and Romanians tend to want to give a very good impression of their country. So if you're foreign, they go out of their way to help you. I think partly because you're to some extent a curiosity, but people are just very friendly. They're very welcoming if you go to their home. They're open to helping you. They go out of their way to do so. And it makes the transition here, which in many respects is quite difficult, a lot easier, because you know that there's help available to you if you need it. And there's solidarity. Perhaps it stems from the communist era, I don't know. But in the West, society's a lot more individualistic. Of course, some people will help if you need it, but here it's more of a given, and you always feel very happy to ask people for help. Another great thing for me is living in Bucharest. I think it's a wonderful city for a foreigner to live. I'm lucky enough to live very centrally, which again in London would be impossible for me for financial reasons. I live very close to some wonderful parks, Chismigiu Park and Izvor Park. And a great thing for me is that here I feel safe. I would go in the park at midnight, at 1 a.m, at 2 a.m, and the atmosphere there is very safe. People are out. I think this is partly because in Romania the average person lives in an apartment, so they don't have their own green space. Therefore the green spaces in the city are a focal point for the community, and families go there, couples go there, old people go there. It has a great community atmosphere. Whereas in the UK, because the average person lives in a house, they have their garden. And after dark, the parks are the preserve of gangs of youths drinking cider. So if it's dark in the UK, you don't set foot in a park normally. Whereas here, you feel happy to do so. And that improves your quality of life a lot. Also, on the streets, I feel it's quite a safe city. There doesn't feel like the threat of violence so much, which in some Western European cities, although of course it's still rare, you feel that there's the possibility of being mugged. Here you just feel safer. Also in Bucharest and in Romania, life moves in very unexpected ways. It's not always a positive, sometimes it can be a negative, but had I stayed in London, then I think my life would have evolved in a more predictable way. Society there is more predictable, whereas here you don't really know from one day to the next what might happen, and it makes life more interesting. In Bucharest, the architecture is very interesting because of the checkered history of the city. The way that the town planning has developed means that you might get a ugly communist monstrosity next to a glorious Art Deco building, and you don't see this sort of contrast in the West so much. So you might turn down a side street and then there's a very interesting architectural juxtaposition. So it doesn't get boring living in the city. You just walk around and you see these things. Some of the buildings are fabulous. They're perhaps like a little bit shabby and they could do with being cleaned or being painted, but they're like inherently very beautiful. Of course, this is more in the centre of the city. Like in the suburbs, there's the blocks from the communist era, which of course to local people are representative of a lot of suffering. But again, as a foreigner, because you haven't suffered personally from this, you can take a slightly different view of it. Then in the countryside, there's also like a great deal to see. I think people from the West know very little about Romania. I certainly knew very little before I came here. But there are some glorious places to visit, the monasteries, the Danube Delta, Transylvania. A lot of it is still quite unspoiled. So for a Westerner, that's wonderful to be able to visit these places, even if the tourism infrastructure is not very developed yet, but that has pluses and minuses.
So we've talked about the good things. Let's get to the bad parts.
I think that the communist era has left a big impression on Romania. One thing I feel here is that sometimes it's difficult for the little person, in the sense that individual rights are not upheld all the time. For example, at one point next to the flat where I live, a derelict building was being renovated and turned into a hotel. And we had a great deal of noise, drilling from very early in the morning, banging, and it lasted for over a year and a half, which had a massive impact on our quality of life. The people at the company had absolutely no time for our complaints. We put a complaint into City Hall, someone came round and measured the noise. The noise was found to be above the allowed noise level, and nothing was done. So sometimes as an individual against a big organisation like a company or the state, it's difficult to get your rights upheld and respected. And I suppose in some way that's a legacy from the communist era, when the state was everything and the individual was insignificant, as embodied by the People's Palace. I mean, the size of that building tells you what you need to know about how the state saw itself and how it saw the individual. Also, on the same theme, it saddens me to see like a lot of very corrupt, powerful people who seem to have a certain impunity regarding their misdeeds. People who've been involved in very damaging scandals where many ordinary Romanians have lost their money. They don't seem to often get prosecuted. They don't seem to be punished for what they do. There doesn't seem to be any comeback. And I imagine it, for anyone that's unfair, but I imagine for Romanians, because they've suffered at the hands of these people, it must be very frustrating. Sometimes the state seems to waste a great deal of money on public projects, perhaps because a bribe has been paid, and the state ends up paying way over the odds for substandard roads or building projects. And the Romanian people are being stolen from, but it seldom seems to end with anyone answering for what they've done. That's very sad to see. On a quality of life level, rules don't seem to be respected that much here. Coming from Britain, where playing by the rules is held up as something quite important, it's quite frustrating to see, like, for example, drivers park totally across the pavement. They park across pedestrian crossings. They sometimes ignore red lights and so on. They certainly ignore speeding rules. So as a result, the accident statistics here are very bad, and it's a very serious thing. A driver being inattentive can kill somebody. So I think in that respect, it would be good if rules were heeded more. I understand perhaps it's part of the Latin culture, perhaps it's from the communist era when many of the rules were very stupid. So people didn't necessarily consider obeying the rules as a value. And I can understand that. But when it comes to something like driving, then it's simply dangerous if the rules are ignored. There are still things that I find difficult culturally. People are very direct here. You might be asked if you believe in God. And there are certain topics in British society that are sort of considered off limits unless you know people very well. A lot to do with money, religion, politics, and here you'll be asked very frank questions, which, if you're not used to it, can sometimes be difficult to cope with. Once I was out with some colleagues, and one of my colleagues launched into a story about a conference that he'd organised and how well it had gone. And another colleague said, "Will you shut up? I'm not interested in hearing about this conference." And the guy who'd been talking about the conference took it well, he smiled and he shut up. If someone had said that to me, I would be mortified. I mean, I don't think I would get over that. But here, people feel free to speak very frankly to each other, which in many ways is a good thing, but sometimes I think the certain amount of politeness can make things easier. Struggling to think of bad things.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good, yeah. Sometimes the service culture here falls below my expectations. It can be very frustrating if you go to a restaurant and the service is lousy, no one can be bothered to take your order, your waiter or waitress is very miserable and surly. It's difficult to understand because coming from a capitalist society, your thinking is, well, if they do a good job, then I'm going to tip them well. And if they don't do a good job, I'm not going to tip them. And it seems such a matter of common sense. But here, I suppose, related to the communist era when jobs weren't awarded on merit, they were awarded on the standing of your family as concerns the Communist Party, then there was not really any incentive to do your job well. So that attitude seems to have been passed down. But it can be quite frustrating if you go somewhere and you speak politely to somebody and you get very rude service in return. I spoke earlier about the smoking issue. It's difficult on a personal level because I don't like to breathe in smoke, but also on a wider societal level, there are great health inequalities between Romania and Western Europe. In Western Europe, governments are now protecting their citizens from the effects of other people's smoke, and Romanians and people who live in Romania are not being protected from other people's smoke. So I think that's a major factor in the big difference in life expectancy between Romania and Western Europe. Another aspect of Romania having been a closed society for so long is that there's a certain ignorance about some issues. I find it quite sad when people here express quite homophobic sentiments. Some Romanians have said to me, Romanians aren't prejudiced against gay people. There are no gay people in Romania. And the media depiction of homosexuality is always the very flamboyant, extreme aspects, such as transvestites and so on. Whereas in reality, a gay person is your neighbour, your colleague at work, your school friends. You might not know it, but gay people are ordinary citizens, nice, nasty, successful, unsuccessful, rich, poor, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not a disease, it's not something you should feel shame over. Of course, in Britain there are many homophobic people too, but I hear these sentiments expressed in Romania by young, educated, intelligent people, and I find it quite sad that in 2012 there's such ignorance, and it often goes unchallenged.
If you look at geographically speaking, from Western Europe to Eastern Europe and beyond to Asia, I think you'll find that the gamut of tolerance toward homosexuality is going to be from the proper thing or the tolerant thing to the extreme. So the more you go east, that's the case. And I don't know if I tend to think it's more geographically localized rather than say it's just the case in Romania, because it's probably the same in Bulgaria or Ukraine, or if you go probably toward Turkey, it's going to be worse. If you go to Iran or Iraq, it's going to be worse.
Yeah, I've written a lot on this issue in Eastern Europe, and indeed it's by no means a Romanian problem. I suppose it relates to communism creating a very closed society, the influence of religion. Partly also, Romanians have just emerged from a very difficult period. Many Romanians still live in poverty. Not everyone in this country has a bathroom yet, so of course when this is the state of society, your first priority is your own standards of living, having enough money to put food on the table and so on. Human rights, animal rights, tolerance, in some ways they're luxuries. When your own needs are met, then you can consider how you treat your animals or how you feel about the minorities in your society, and then what your opinion is on fur coats, then you can consider these issues. So I understand it, and I try not to judge, but I think it must be very difficult to be a gay person in Romania and Eastern Europe more widely. I hope this is something that will change. I'm sure it will, because if you went to Britain a few decades ago, you would find similar levels of prejudice. It changes, but it takes time.
Let's talk about interesting experiences that you've had while in Romania. The good, the bad, the crazy, the funny.
So when I first came here, I was determined to be quite open-minded about the food and eat food that was quite strange to me, like pig fat and pig skin, and give it all a try. And a lot of Romanians were very into tripe soup, ciorba de burtă,
Yes.
which was a bit strange to me, but I tried it and I liked it. So I would eat that, but I would eat the soup and leave the actual tripe in the bowl. And I was travelling with a friend in the west of Romania, and we were eating outside at a restaurant, and I ordered tripe soup. And a woman was there, like I think she was a drug addict, or she seemed on drugs. She was begging from people sitting outside the restaurant. We were trying to have our meal and so on. And the staff at the restaurant, because we were outside, they took a long time to clear the plate. So the plates were sitting on the table, the bowl with the soup finished, but the tripe remaining. And the woman who was begging from us eventually entered the terrace of the restaurant, came over to my bowl, put her hand in, took out the tripe and ate it, and then took my bread and threw it at me because we hadn't given her any money. And that was about 8 years ago, and I haven't eaten any tripe soup since because I have this image in my head still. Bucharest is a very modern city, so now not so much happens here that is very unusual or striking for me. But sometimes I go out of Bucharest and then out of my comfort zone a little bit. Once I was taking a train from Garid and in the same carriage as us, the train was very full, were some people from the countryside, and there was a rather large woman who was sitting opposite us and obviously settling down for a long overnight journey, took off her shoes and put her feet up on my seat next to me here. So I had a stranger's feet right here, which was made for an interesting journey.
Yes, I'm sure it did.
Outside Bucharest, I've stayed in houses that don't have a bathroom in the sense of what I understand. We had to get up in the middle of the night in February at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to an outside toilet. If you wanted a drink of water, you had to go to the well and get it. So in a sense, it's a bit like going back in time, which is interesting, if not necessarily what you want to be doing at 4 a.m. in February.
I had to go back to the woman that took her shoes off. Didn't you tell her anything? Did you say something?
Because I'm British, I find it really hard to address these situations. I think that I try to wedge her feet out of the way by putting my bag on or by her feet and then edging my bag over. So in the end she had to move them and she wasn't very happy about it. But in my 3 decades plus of life, I had not found myself in that situation before of having to ask someone to remove their bare feet from by my legs. So I didn't really have an answer from the book as to what to do about it.
That must have been a very interesting juxtaposition. I'm sorry I'm laughing so much, but a proper British lady and a very rude woman with bare feet. I would have liked to be in that compartment just to see the expression on your face. That must have been precious.
Yeah, I mean, looking back now, I find it quite funny, but it did take me rather out of my comfort zone. But then that's what living abroad is all about. So now I can look back on it differently, but at the time I was rather shocked, to put it mildly.
So after all of your time in Romania now, say somebody did it to you today, would you say something?
No, probably not.
So you still haven't gotten over that?
I've got a bit more direct, simply because you have to. And if you retained all of your British manners and mannerisms, then it would be quite an ordeal. But I would still probably just try to wedge her feet out of the way with my bag. You can take the woman out of Britain, but you can't take the Briton out of the woman.
So after, is it 9 years in Romania?
Yes.
You speak Romanian?
Vorbesc limba română, dar fac foarte mult greșeli. Și acum am o profesoară foarte deșteptă, pentru că stau aici de 9 ani și ar fi foarte prost să stau aici de 10 ani și nu vorbesc limba. Și nu este ceva frumos. Atunci am lecție și sper că încet pot vorbi, dar oameni români vor foarte mult să vorbesc în engleză când ei știi că ești străin. Și în mod normal vorbesc limba română mai mult în Anglia decât în România, pentru că când sunt acasă, aud limba română pe stradă foarte des și fiecare dată vorbesc cu cineva care vorbește român și explic că sunt străină și stau în Bucharest de 8-9 ani și ei sunt foarte surprins și vorbește în română, în engleză în fiecare zi și atât. Și vor să vorbească cu mine în limba română. Așa, în Anglia vorbesc română și aici vorbesc în engleză. Did it make sense?
Oh, yes, absolutely, great. Good. So now comes a part where I ask you for advice for your compatriots.
I would recommend almost anyone to come and live in Romania, provided you're open-minded. I'm very happy that I came here. I feel I had it was good to leave your own society and experience something else. You learn a lot about yourself and your own society that way. I would advise people to maybe do a little bit of research. Like I didn't do much myself, but you can't expect to have exactly the same standards that you get at home. You'll find problems with the service culture, you'll find certain things difficult, but the advantages of living here far outweigh the disadvantages. And after the first few months, you'll start to adjust. It will be great for your career, it will be great for your life experience, it will be character building. And I would certainly recommend it to anyone from Britain.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Debbie.
It's been a great pleasure.